Hello, this is Skit, and today I'll be looking at the version 4 SilentBlue, looking at what was not so good about it and how I attempting to fix the issues from this robot. So, as you can see, this is the new version, or at least the chassis for the new kind of my idea on what the new SilentBlue will be looking like. And um, let's look at the first issue. So the first issue was pretty glaringly obvious. The bar here would keep coming off, and I believe that is half because I'm using a small turntable on the robot, and because the bar is very long. And um, this means that when people and the verts are hitting the bar on the underside here or here, that means that the bar length is acting as a pretty big lever to essentially, here's a pivot point, just pry the bar off. So that means I need to make the bar smaller. And when I'm making the bar smaller, that also means that the chassis also needs to be smaller, and obviously the chassis is way too big because, as you can see, there is so much air gap, so many spaces where there is no use of any parts at all. Even up here, these two bits here, like for centering, it's completely useless, honestly, to the robot's official functionality. So I need to make the chassis a lot smaller, and as you can see in the side-by-side comparison, it is a lot smaller now. This robot will be so much smaller, and that means I can put a smaller bar on. As a result of the smaller bar, it's going to be lighter, and I'll have a less moment of inertia, meaning that I can use the slower instead of slower output, I can use the faster output, meaning that this bar will spin faster, and that comes down to the calculation for the kinetic energy of a rotational object. So the rotational kinetic energy is calculated by output on screen, half times the moment of inertia times the RPM, essentially, or like the speed at which it spins around. So that RPM is actually squared. And when I say I reduce the moment of inertia by a third, but I increase the RPM by a third, that third is being squared. That means that the overall kinetic energy will be a lot higher. And you might be asking, why don't you just spin the bar as fast as you can? Well, that means that obviously there's less weight, less reach, and comes down to bite as well. And usually with these slower horizontal spinners that are on the top, it's a lot harder to spin faster. So this will be probably capped at about 2000 RPM compared to about 1500-ish on the old slower output, which is obviously a lot better. So another issue I had, which was not as obvious, is that these chains have kind of proved that they aren't in the meta anymore. They're not very useful because they keep falling off. It was very hard to see in some fights, but the chain would sometimes on one side of the drive or both sides of the drive would fall off after a big hit. Not even directly to it because I mean it's inside the robot, but it would occasionally fall off, and that means I have moved to a well, slightly heavier but improved drive system. So the drive system will be a fully geared drive system, no chains involved, so it's a lot more durable. And I'll also be able to gear it up by gearing from a 28 tooth to a 20 tooth gear, which means that I have a 1.4 gear ratio on these wheels. And as you can see, I'm using skinnier wheels for the space and weight. This also means that the space for the drive is actually kept the same, 5 studs across, but that also means that I get to put the gears here instead. So this obviously saves space on the robot, saves a lot of weight, and that gives me a lot of weight for bracing. So bracing here, bracing here, bracing here, which means it covers basically the most of the robot. And it's a lot stronger. So I obviously took a couple inspirations from the old design, moving from power functions L motors to the powered up L motors, because the Brewers 3.0 only takes two power function outputs, meaning that I have to switch to these regardless. And I think those, I don't know exactly what the difference between these two are. I know it's slightly slower, that's why I have these gear ratio um, to increase the speeds very slightly. But overall, it's going to be relatively the same drive apart from the gears. Now, the robot in V4, the front plate here, I don't really know why I switched away from the wedge. I think the wedge worked perfectly fine, and it never broke. It never once broke in a fight. So I think that while I am showing the brick separators in this design here, it would be definitely worthwhile revisiting a wedge similar to the one on version 3, because the one on version 3, I think it was really good. I think it worked very well, and that means if I go back to it, I don't actually have to use these brick separators. And I'm a bit skeptical and a bit hesitant to use these. Similar on version 4 is a bit skeptical as well, is because they stick out so far from the robot that the bar actually doesn't even cover these. The bar only goes up to about here on the old robot. So you're not really getting much bite, and if you are, you're probably just hitting your opponent into your forks, and that's just going to cause a lot of issues, tearing them out, etc. So if I have a really short wedge with that high angle that I used, I think that would be a lot better. So yeah, I think overall I've managed to at least propose a couple ideas that could overall fix a lot of the issues that were on the old SilentBlue. Like the last one would be no bracing. No bracing. As soon as vertical spinner hit this side, this piece would just fly off. Like these pieces, although all for decoration, they would just all fly off. So I think I hope at least I've proposed ideas that have fixed some of these some of these problems on the old version. And yeah, I really hope that the new version does a lot better.